Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka Podcast. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by the editor at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, all good. It's a slow week for MMA this week. We've got a bit of PFL to look forward to, which I'm personally very excited for. But it's World Cup. It's World Cup fever at the moment across the entire globe. And as we probably saw yesterday for England, they played Iran, won 6-2. But what's important is I think that my UFC Dream Team would have given Iran a run for their money. So it's definitely worth reading that article and seeing just how far my UFC Dream Team could get in the competition.
Man, I did read the article. It's a great article, and it's great that we finally have the World Cup. It's been delayed since earlier this summer. And yes, we will talk PFL, Bellator, even some UFC, believe it or not. Just we're in between a bunch of good stuff right now. But I feel like England basically gets a pass here. Like, they're just going to the next round based on who they're playing, right?
Yeah. Having watched the Iran game, most of the Iran game yesterday, I was in and out of work, and then I managed to watch the USA and Wales game. I think we breezed through the group, which is lucky.
Yeah.
And it's hopefully if we do quite well, get quite far in the competition, we've then got either UFC Cardiff or UFC London to look forward to in March, which is just carry on that momentum through the winter, through into March, and then we've got Leon Edwards as champion at the moment. We've got Tom Aspinall still, he's out at the moment, of course, but he's looking to get his way back. We've got Paddy Pimblett on UFC 282, got Darren Till on 282. So the state of English sport, not only football, but mixed martial arts is good at the moment. Yes, we had Danny Roberts lose this weekend to Jack Maddalena, but in that kind of form, who's not losing to Jack Maddalena? He was impressive this weekend, but let's hope that the Australians don't do quite so well in the World Cup from a selfish point of view.
Do you think that there is a chance, because Leon Edwards and I think it's Renegade MMA, they just kind of changed their gym a little bit, like coaching staff is a little bit refreshed there. What if suddenly they turned around and had a Gracie-like dynasty, or had a Nurmagomedov-like dynasty that we're seeing? Could you imagine how amazing this would be, that Leon Edwards just sails off into the sunset, 13 title defenses?
I mean, stranger things have happened. For sure. But no, like you're sort of alluding to there, you've got Leon Edwards, who's undefeated since he lost to Kamaru Usman the first time back in, I think that was 2016.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Fabian Edwards, his brother, who obviously trains at the same gym, who I believe won his last fight against Charlie Ward in Bellator. He's been up there for Bellator for all of his career, really. He obviously beat Lyoto Machida a good few months ago now, but that's a huge win for someone from quite a small gym. It's a well-known gym now because of Leon Edwards, but it hasn't always been. You've got Great British Top Team, you've got Team Calbon, you've got all the sort of bigger quote unquote gyms, and a lot of the English guys travel because there's not the bodies here. You've got Arnold Allen that's gone up to Birmingham to train at Renegade, and I mean, look at what that's done for his career. Yes, obviously his last fight didn't quite go to plan, where he beat Calvin Kattar, but it was the injury. But at the end of the day, he won that first round. He looked sharp in that first round.
Yeah. Team Renegade's quite good. Jai Herbert's looking like refreshed.
Herbert, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like he turned around and it was a completely different fighter in his last fight. This might actually end up being one of the powerhouse gyms, because we always said, unfortunately for MMA, like, you do need to be stateside for the best training in the world, and that's largely still true, relatively. But it would be really nice if the UK could get a really world-class gym that has replicable fighters. Even in Canada, the one good gym that they have, TriStar, really it's just one guy. We're not repeating the results over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes gyms, I don't say fail, but they suffer from having that one guy or one girl that gets through the net, as it were.
Yeah,
we've got hundreds of examples. GSP at TriStar, like you say, he was, I think, the exception from that gym. Yes, you've got Rory McDonald. Yes, you've got other fighters that train out of TriStar, but GSP is the name out of that gym. You've got Team Cowbon with Darren Till, the name out of that gym. You've got I can't remember. I know it's Edmund. Is it Glendale Fight Club with Ronda Rousey?
Yeah, I think Glendale.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Doesn't count. It did barely count.
You know.
What about that one Irish gym with that one Irish fighter? I don't.
Gunnar Nelson trained out of SPG.
That's right. That's right.
No, exactly. But the point remains is that you have these gyms, that produce staffed ATT, AKA, Rufus Sport. These gyms that are just producing world-class talent after world-class talent after world-class talent after world-class talent, and then you've got these gyms that seemingly focus and surround one person, one fighter that they put all their sort of trust and faith in, which is, is, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. Edmund Shabazian was obviously looking good coming out of Glendale Fight Club and then just fell off a cliff almost, and I think he returns at 282. So it's for Leon, I think he's got the right people around him that are willing to sort of almost give up their time and give up their potential and their ability to make Leon the best that he can be. And I mean, at the moment, he's the best one at 170 in the world.
Yeah, it's incredible what he's done, and I actually think he hangs on to the title in a rematch. And I hope that gym keeps going. City Kickboxing, that's another one where it doesn't seem like one guy. It just seems like that's suddenly a good gym coming out from there. I mean, the gym's also go in phases. Like if this was a few years ago, we would be talking about Shute Box. And now we don't really talk about Shute Box at all. It's weird that it goes in trends. So in 10 years, we're either talking about the amazing Renegade MMA or like, what was the name of the gym?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's still the fact that English fighters still do travel. I've seen a lot of English fighters go over to Thailand lately. We'll go on to talk about Brendan Loughnane later, but he goes and lives in Dubai, lives in Thailand, trains in Dubai now and again, ahead of obviously the PFL this weekend. Darren Till, we saw that crazy picture that, I mean, if you would have told me this time last year that we'll see a picture of Darren Till in Thailand training with
Mark Hunt and Marvin Vettori. Yeah, what is this?
I mean, and then he's gone over to All Star in Sweden to train with Hamzat and the Smash Bros and all this. It's UK. I think that the UK, our arguably, well, I say arguably, on paper, our most successful fighter, Michael Bisping. Yeah. He had to go stateside. He obviously trained almost for as long as he could in the UK, and then had to go and train with Jason Perillo at the whatever his gym's called, Jason Perillo's RVC.
I don't know the name.
But he had to go stateside to really take his career to that next level. And look, his last three fights, yes, the Calvin Gastelum one is what it is, but his last three fights were all title fights.
Yeah,
he's clearly improved. Yes, he got the opportunity on short notice, but he grabbed that opportunity with both hands.
Yeah.
Then he beat Dan Henderson back at home. Then he obviously lost to GSP in that sort of almost money-making fight in MSG. But on paper, not even on paper, they are his three biggest fights. And they came at the back end of his career when he's moved over to America to train. So I think the UK is still far behind, but the sport is still in its infancy. If we compare this to football, the US is far behind the UK. And England, and it's because football's been going for for hundreds and hundreds of years. MMA is professional. MMA as a job, as a professional licensed sport is, I'd say, no more than 30 years old. The UFC is 26, 27 years old.
Yeah.
So it's still in its infancy, and we're still, we're seeing fighters come through now. We're seeing. Raul Rosa is on UFC 282. He's 17 years old. Yeah. People are beginning to train MMA, not boxing. Or I could maybe make a bit of money in MMA, Holly Holm. people are beginning to train MMA. Rory McDonald was really the first one that we saw come through in the sort of big leagues, as it were, that trained MMA. And I think that's what a lot of UK-based fighters now are starting with MMA. Yes, they might do it. They might get into it from kickboxing, but they've never competed in kickboxing. It's I'll go to a kickboxing class and now I'll take up MMA, and we're progressing through. So hopefully, when we're still doing this podcast in 20 years, we'll have far more UK-based champions, because we will have caught up with. We've got the facilities, we've got the money. And I think there's a lot of hot prospects coming out of the UK at the moment, and it's an exciting time. But like I say, we're quite far behind the US still.
Do you think there's a possibility where, because it seems like there are just certain countries that do MMA and do MMA at a proper level: the US, Brazil, Russia. Russia's kind of a surprising one that they skipped over the UK and just really got ahead in the last little while here. UK has an opportunity absolutely to become a powerhouse in this, but I do feel like the UFC does need to come back to Cardiff, because there's rabid fans here. The fans in the UK are the best in the world. The US needs to step out of the US, or sorry, the UFC needs to step way out of the US, because I think most of the fans, whenever they go back to Brazil, whenever they go back to Russia, anything like that, fans are amazing there. You got to come back to Cardiff. You can do some random just neighborhood in London. It's great. You're going to sell out.
And luckily this weekend we've heard from Dana to say, look, we're in the new year in 2023. We're looking to step out of the Apex. We're looking to do more live shows, because the Apex was phenomenal for what it was when the lockdown was on, when you couldn't leave your house, when COVID was rife. You've got a purpose-built specific arena where you can manage who goes in, who goes out. You make all the money from the all the money goes back into the company, as it were. Obviously, it goes to the fighters, but you don't have to rent out an O2 arena, an MSG.
Yeah,
it was spot on for what we needed it at the time.
Yep.
But we've seen now that we don't need to be going back to the Apex every. We had 280, UFC 280.
Yep.
Massive crowds in Las Vegas. And then we've gone back to the Apex. And then we've had MSG, massive crowd in MSG. Then we've gone back to the Apex. It feels very, very up and then all the way down, and then up and then all the way down. And we've seen from fight nights, the 2 fight nights in London have produced some
unreal, phenomenal
fights. The pay-per-view card in Singapore with Glover and Jiri,
unreal.
One. Obviously, the second fight is coming in a few weeks, but when we go on the road as the UFC, it delivers. We've seen it deliver. I mean, the PFL have overtaken the UFC. They went to Cardiff. They went to London.
Yep.
They're on the road. They're at MSG this weekend. They're doing their shows in front of crowds. And it's like I say, luckily this week Dana said, look, we're progressing out of the Apex again, and that's what we need. And it's an exciting time, because there's nothing like UFC MMA with fans.
Yeah.
And I personally, I think, this weekend we were talking off air, and obviously we'll go into it now, but it was a little bit of a sort of a damp card, and it wasn't the best card on paper anyway, let alone when the main event got pulled. What was it, 2-3 hours before they were meant to make the walk?
Something like that. Yeah. There was no energy behind it anyway. People weren't interested. People weren't clamoring for it. If you look on social media at the Instagram pages that really dedicate themselves to this, they weren't talking about this fight night at all. They weren't. No, exactly. There was no mention of it. We were still talking about Pereira. We were even talking about Usman or Nurmagomedov, but nobody was talking about this fight night.
Yeah, for sure. And and that, for me, that speaks volumes. The UFC, it started off really well with Natalia Silva, that spinning back kick KO. Yes. And we were thinking, nice, let's go. We're gonna grab this energy and we're gonna run with it. And then we had 7-8 decisions in a row. Then we had Jack Della Maddalena, Muslim Salikov. Then we had the heavyweight fight, which, in my opinion, could have been stopped. It didn't need to go 15 minutes. Jay Sherman was just getting beaten up. And then we had the main event, the new main event. Obviously, Derek Lewis was pulled from the fight.
Yeah.
mere hours before we were meant to make the walk. And, you know, I messaged you and said, look, on today's pod, can we talk about backing up main events? Because they do it for title fights. They do it for pay-per-views. What would be the harm in having a fighter weigh in, especially at heavyweight?
Yeah.
You know, what would be the harm in having a fighter weighing in and just being on call, just in case anything happens, that, you know, in case any of the fighters, obviously heavyweight is slightly different, but, you know, next week we've got next week, not this coming weekend, the weekend after, we've got Kevin Holland versus Stephen Thompson. What happens if one of those misses weight or has a really bad weight cut?
I know.
We want, in my opinion, I know for a fact this will not happen because the UFC do not want to pay fighters who don't fight. And it's almost an irrelevant conversation, but it's a point for discussion. Is, you know, this weekend, Spivak versus Lewis, there wasn't a great clamoring for it anyway. But then when it got cancelled, we almost missed the fight, in my opinion. And, you know, it's Sergey Spivak that I feel for, because I don't know what his contract is. Let's say he's on, say, 50 and 50. He's missed out on a potential 50 grand win bonus.
Yeah.
Which is huge. That is a huge amount of potentially life-changing money for Spivak. He's gone through his whole camp. This fight, because there wasn't the clamor for it, probably won't get rebooked.
No, probably not.
But what would be the harm in having Alexander Romanov, a Chris Daukaus, a Marcin Tybura weighing in? Okay, Derek Lewis is out of the fight on Fight Night. Right, Romanov, yes, you're in. You got to, you know, I think you've obviously, there's got to be a cutoff point of you can't jump in, you know, 10 minutes before he's meant to make the walk. But but you know, especially with Derek Lewis, he's got a history of this. He pulled out the fight with Fabricio Verdum on the night of, and then Walt Harris stepped in. He's pulled out of fights where he's pulled out of fights before at very late notice. So why not sort of back up the main event in this situation? And, you know, perhaps the backup fighter doesn't get paid is show money. Perhaps they get paid, you know, if obviously if you show, you get paid your show money plus 10 grand for stepping in on late notice. But if you don't, if you're not needed, you know, maybe we pay you 20%. All you've done is weigh in. And I know that's a tough bit of the sport, but you know, you haven't had to fight, you've gone through a training camp. It is what it is. But you you limit or eradicate the cancellation of a main event, because let's be honest, I thought it was a good fight, but Kennedy and
Njoku
nailed it. I would butcher it, but Kennedy versus Kutalaba. I'll call him Kennedy for his own for my own sake. But he's not a main event fight. It was a really good fight. I thought it was really good. I thought the finish was phenomenal. After losing the first round, he's come back. He's landed that knee as Kutalaba's changed levels. That's not a main event fight.
No.
At all. Coming off the back of one of the better fights of the year, or fight cards of the year, sorry, when you've had two title fights and a fight of the year contender, and then you've got this as the main event. And I no disrespect to these guys, but they know that they're not main event fighters, hence why they were the co-main event.
Yes.
It's a dicey co-main event.
It's a dicey co-main.
You know, if I'm honest, but you know.
Well, I completely agree with you. Of like, it seems so basic and so simple. It's something that we've been talking about for years and years. Of like, I don't know how the UFC they learned it so slow to have a backup weigh in. And even if they had another fight on the card of like, okay, so this guy, you know, another middleweight is fighting. If this middleweight title fight drops out, we have the middleweight backup because he's fighting on the card. That's fine. That's not a big deal. I do really like what they did at UFC 280. It just seems so late. You guys have existed. The Zuffa buyout is almost 20 years old now. Like, this organization, this administration with the UFC has existed for so long, and they haven't learned those lessons, but they learned them. They learned them so slowly because the UFC 280 with Alexander Volkanovski was such a boon because Volkanovski had nothing to do. So the only thing he was doing was working with the marketing team. He was out there he was the guy on social media more than the main event fighters. He gave interviews to every organization because there was nothing for him to do. So he was a great backup. That's a great benefit. But in terms of this is a marketing prize fighting ploy, you just have some guy who's itching to fight giving interviews to media members. This is such a win-win-win situation for everybody. Even like you said, pay him 20%. That's actually not a big deal. I think most fighters would jump at that opportunity. Of like, we're paying for your flight to Brazil this time or Abu Dhabi this time. Just be on weight. 20%. If you need to fight, of course, it's 100% of your pay, all that good stuff. But yeah, they learn these lessons so slowly.
But look at what it's done for Volkanovski as well. Yeah. He's now got the opportunity to go and be a double champ, and that you get the benefits of being that guy who weighs in for no reason.
I know.
Hypothetically, like I say, look at what it's done for Volkanovski. You got the instant headline of Makhachev wins, but he instantly goes after Volkanovski. Volkanovski's a talking point. How many more? With the fight announcement aside, how many more headlines have we seen from Volkanovski than we have of Charles Oliveira? Charles Oliveira has almost fallen off. We haven't really heard much from Charles Oliveira. Volkanovski stayed right in the limelight. He's been on Aerial. He's been on this. He's been on that. And it clearly pays. It matters, and especially for a fight card as no disrespect to any of the fighters on the card, but as shallow as this. I've just pulled up the Holland Thompson card. Let's hope that doesn't fall off. But if one of those two fighters falls off, we've got RDA in the co-main event who's going to weigh in at 170, or Brian Barberena who's going to weigh in at 170. One of those can jump into the main event. And that alone, you've got a former champion, former title challenger in RDA who can step into the main event. He's a main event fighter. Further down the card, you got Taito Avasa, who has headlined an event in his last fight and is always exciting. Derek Brunson versus Jack Manson. Both of these guys headlined events before. You've got, Clay Guida on the card who can jump into a co-main event and make it interesting. Mark Giacchese who can jump into a co-main event and make it interesting. These guys, there are names on this card. And, you've got Angela Hill, who I believe that, suffered the same sort of fate, as it were, where she had to step into a main event spot in recent times, a while back. And
Angela Hill is had one of the most interesting careers of anyone in the recent times.
And does Angela Hill win every fight? Absolutely not. She's got a 14-12 record. Have you heard of Angela Hill?
Yeah.
Pretty much every fan, every media member, well, every media member has, of course, but pretty much every fan has heard of Angela Hill. And you've got a girl, again, I'm going to have to be careful with the pronunciation here. Yasmin Juragway.
You couldn't have picked an easier one. You couldn't have picked You couldn't have picked Emily. You picked Yasmin.
Exactly. But she made a UFC debut on the main card, and now she's the first that she's a curtain jerker on the fight night card. That doesn't make sense to me. But she grabbed the opportunity, and now she's in the UFC. She debuted on the main card. Now she's a curtain jerker. It's strange that we're still not, backing up fights with weak cards. No disrespect to these guys, but they won't. They don't need to back up this main event in a week's time because the co-main event's strong. One of the co-main event can go. Either do that or put another heavyweight fight on the card. So whatever your main event, always put another fight of, we had Chase Sherman on the card. Why they didn't put maybe a Chase Sherman or DaCosta or Acosta in the main event slot? Why just cancel that fight altogether?
I know.
It's a confusing one for me, but it is what UFC going to UFC, like we always say.
They're just it's so slow to learn the lessons that just like this is, even if we're saying at worst you're paying a guy 20%, just pay him, and it saves your main event slot. And then if he doesn't, you get a guy doing interviews all week with media members. It's such a win-win-win situation overall. Like, it's just such an easy thing. Like you said, put another same weight on it. I don't get it. I don't know. Anyway, this weekend we had Bellator 288, and this is one thing I want to talk about. The Nurmagomedov dynasty. They've got an undefeated champion in Bellator. They've got an undefeated champion in the UFC. They've got undefeated fighters in one championship. Where's our Sakuraba? Who's going to beat this dynasty? Can there be one? Is there a style out there that can actually counter this top position destruction? This like lifetime of wrestling. Is there someone who can beat this? Not someone. Is there a style that can beat this?
The style is the style that they use.
Yeah,
and they're the only guys that can do it that effectively. how do you beat a Khabib? You put an Islam Makhachev in there with him, who can defend takedowns and is willing to go to the ground. How do you defeat a Makhachev? With a Khabib. How do you meet an Nurmagomedov? With a Khabib-style fighter. You know, Patricky Pitbull is no slouch on the ground, and he was battered. I think there was a 10-8 in there. He
wasn't close.
Yeah, he was never winning that fight after the first 2 rounds.
Yeah,
after the first 3 rounds, it was clear that it could have been stopped. He was never getting back into that fight. And yes, Patricky Pitbull isn't he's not the be all and end all. He's not he's not even the best brother in that. He lost to, he's lost 2 of his last. Well, heading into it, he lost 2 of his last 3, and his only win came against Peter Queally, who again himself isn't top of the tree. But I don't think you can take. Usman Nurmagomedov can only beat what's in front of him, and Patricky Pitbull was in front of him, and he dominated him. He's finished the 3 prior to this. He finished all of them by stoppage. This one, he probably could have been stopped, but he just dominated that fight. And it was surprising to me how I picked him going in, of course, but surprising how dominant he was.
Oh, amazing! It was flawless. Go ahead.
No. I just wanted to echo your point. Who no one in Bellator beats him, and does that say more about Bellator? AJ McKee is probably going to be next in line. He didn't look good in his lightweight debut. He beat Spike Carlisle by decision.
Yeah.
He's got a dangerous guard, but you need more than a dangerous guard to beat these guys. And, I don't see anyone beating him. And is it time that we spoke about Nurmagomedov coming over? But he won't ever come over to the UFC, because why would he?
No. He's
not going to challenge for a UFC title unless he moves up in weight, because Islam Makhachev, his teammate, is the king at 155. Sorry, so it's difficult. But what I also think is interesting about this entire card, we had Nemkov dominate Corey Anderson as well. That was surprising. But
well, this is what we expected from their first fight. We thought it would look like this. Yeah,
exactly. And almost stopped him, almost knocked him out in that at the very end of was it the first round or the second round with that spinning wheel kick? It's just crazy. But this weekend, the UFC, by possibly not backing up their main event, have really let themselves down, because Bellator, all the headlines Bellator, they captured it, and they just, for want of a better word, they dominated the UFC in the
news cycle. They beat them in the news cycle.
Exactly. We've got the 2 sort of main talking points, the Nurmagomedov and Nemkov, but then they've backed that up with the fight announcement of Nemkov versus Yoel Romero in sometime next year. I can't quite remember when they announced it for. And then they've backed that up with Fedor's retirement fight.
Pretty good.
They found the spark that they needed, and they just put more wood on the fire. And they have smashed this week. And with no UFC and no Bellator this week, yes, the headlines are going to be PFL, but the headlines are still going to be Bellator. There's no UFC headlines aside from maybe the James Krause being banned stuff that anyone's going to really cotton onto, because there's nothing going on this week for the UFC, and they've missed a trick, in my opinion, by almost allowing Bellator to just run with it. And fair play to Bellator and Scott Coker. They've done really well.
I'm a little bit surprised too that they won the news cycle that handedly, and going forward, like those are the weeks where they really need to step on the gas. Bellator, 1 championship, PFL. Like we're seeing it last weekend, a little bit was almost an accident. This weekend, we're seeing everybody jump in and try to host like events this weekend. UFC 282, there's nothing for a while. Like even the Holland Thompson one's not a major card. UFC 282 is not until December 11th. So that's why we're seeing so many 1s and PFLs and Bellators in the next couple of weeks here, because there's no UFC. And those are the gaps that they need to fill. If there's no UFC, there's so much UFC now. It's almost weekly. It's almost to every week there's a UFC. There's an opportunity where there's no UFC. You have to be in there. You've got to win that news cycle, right?
Exactly. And I think in a way that 1 championship would be that one to take the sort of shine off Bellator, but because they have these midweek cards, first of all, a lot of people sort of breeze over them almost. I say midweek. It was Friday, Thursday night, Friday night card.
For us in Europe, it's super weird. It's like Friday 4 a.m. and then Saturday 10 a.m.
Exactly.
So it's super weird for us here in the UK.
Exactly, and it's they had huge names on the
yes
Thursday Friday card. You had Rod Tang, Christian Lee. That comeback was phenomenal. Absolute quality. Cosmo Alexander, who people have heard of, Jonathan Haggerty from a UK perspective, Danielle Kelly, who that was easy for Danielle Kelly. You can watch if you've missed it, just go on Twitter, search her name because it lasts all of
it's like 2 minutes,
a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and she just dominates the girl she was fighting. And she shouldn't on paper, she shouldn't dominate. She should dominate. She should win, but do not dominate like that. Come on, like we're talking. It wasn't even close.
Her opponent was a combat sambo, multi-time champion. Like it's a good one. Also for hardcores, Bibiano Fernandez was fighting on the card. Every time I see his name, I'm like, God, the dream champion is still fighting. Bibiano Fernandez is out here still, 42 years old. Oh man, he does need to retire. However, good for him.
Exactly. Like you say, it's probably time, and that performance probably showed it. But then you've got the second one championship card, which I think people are kind of tired of almost in a way.
I know.
Spread them out a little bit. We had this fight had Yushin Okami on it.
I know.
Fought on this card. Shinya Aoki fought on this card.
I know. Shinya Aoki got murdered. He had no Shinya Aoki shouldn't be fighting strikers anymore. This is Shinya Aoki hasn't been in his prime since he got beat up by Gilbert Melendez in Bellator. It's been more than 10 years since he was a notable, really good fighter. It has been way too long since he was worth talking about. And I just feel bad to see him get pummeled like this. And it's like Sakuraba. Most of his career he was bad. There was more length of time that he was bad than he was actually good. But I don't like seeing his brain get hit this much.
At his age as well, it's one championship supposedly do so much to protect their fighters with weight cutting and whatnot, and then they say, "Man, I'd go in there with a striker that's just going to knock your head into next week." It's like, whoa, where are we standing on this? Where are we? Are we protecting the guys? Are we fucking the guys up? There's no in between. There's no let's let them weight cut, which I'd be interested to discuss just briefly. I think it 7, 8 fighters all miss weight. We had to have a cancellation on the card itself, the first one championship card. So, are they doing things the right way? It's difficult, It's when you've got that many fighters missing weight, it's a bad look for one championship. Or missing the hydration. Was it hydration? I get a little bit confused with one because they weigh in constantly, don't they? They're weighing in every so often before the fight.
Yeah, it was John Wayne Parr who was the one who really peeled back the curtain of how he was not complaining because he's a really happy person, just that's his natural self. But John Wayne Parr did an Instagram post where he was talking about so I missed, oh man, I forget too, but he missed hydration. So he's so I need to go drink a cup of water, which is going to put weight on. So I need to lose that water that I just put on, but I still need to hold enough water that I can make hydration. So I think there's a couple things here. What they want to do is make sure that you're not dehydrated when you make weight because they want your safety to be paramount. Because in 2015, I think they had a person pass away due to cutting too much weight. And that can happen. That's a really serious thing in MMA that we don't ever talk about is that weight cutting is deadly. Actually, we talk about it all the time. Yeah. Everybody knows this. This is weekly. However,
we talk about it, but the bigwigs and the executives just, well, it's a part of the sport.
But they waited until someone died before they did anything about it. However, so the idea is that you are not dehydrated. So we're going to do a quick blood test to make sure you have enough water. At the same time, you're making weight. And you have to make both. And people miss all the time. Rodang misses all the time. Jonathan Haggerty has basically never made both at the same time. They've had canceled fights just this past week due to this happening all the time. It's very, I think philosophically, it makes a lot of sense. In execution, it's really, really hard to do. Because, again, if you miss one, you have to go either cut more water or you have to drink more water, putting on more weight. It's just it's very hard to find. It's a double-edged
sword, isn't it? It's you're hydrated for the 10 minutes that you need to pass the hydration test, and then suddenly you're trying to get that water that you just got off. But for me, I think that a safer way to do it would just be to have people constantly weigh in. So, let's say a month out from the fight, the rule is that you have to be within 10, I don't know, 5% of your fight weight.
Yeah.
So you gradually bring it down and bring it down and bring it down through dieting, rather than, you get to, let's say, a 170 pound fighter, rather you get to 190 on fight week, the week before fight week, you cut to 180, and then you just absolutely deplete yourself. It's not safe. We know it's not safe. We've seen it not be safe. We've seen people miss weight. We've seen people barely make weight, and then it affect their performance. Comes to mind Aspinall versus Jermaine Durandamy, the first shot that she got hit with in 16 seconds into the fight, and it was over. You can't tell me that's not because she, I don't want to get out of bed when I feel a bit rough. These people have got to go and fight in a cage for up to 25 minutes. It's dangerous. For want of a better word, it's dangerous. And we thought that One Championship were maybe doing it the right way by forcing their fighters to, you have to be hydrated or you'll fail the test. But I didn't know that it wasn't as sort of strict as they make out. Obviously, you've alluded to it there with Jonathan Haggerty missing, essentially never making both weights. But it's either have it or don't. Do you know what I mean? Either have Jonathan Haggerty making the hydration test, then making the weight. If he fails one, give him an hour, 2 hours to make the weight. If not, cut him from the event. It's. And then you'll start seeing people make weight safely and a lot more often. If you say we're going to take you off this event, you're going to lose your money because you haven't stuck to your contract. People are not going to miss weight as often because at the moment there's no sanctions. There's no
sanctioning body,
and there's no consequences at the moment for missing weight. Yes, you lose 20% of your purse. Well, but if you win, you double your purse anyway. It's like, well, start finding these guys 50% of their purse. Start finding these guys, like we said a couple of weeks ago, start knocking off a point in the first round. They start the maximum points they can win in the first round is 9.
Yeah.
And so even if they absolutely dominate the first round, or even if they win the first round convincingly, clearly, it's still only a 9-9. So you're equal going into the second round. Something needs to be done, but it's probably gonna a little foreshadowing of my sort of hopes and dreams for 2023 pieces. We need to address the weight cutting issue because you can't tell me that Derek Lewis, who cuts to heavyweight, wasn't affected. Yes, he had a medical issue. It's still yet to come out, I think, what that medical issue was specifically, but we need to address it. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous for how people are missing weight. And we'll go on to talk about the PFL now. They have to make weight. Pretty much. The top 4 fighters on this card: Kayla Harrison, Larissa Pacheco, Brendan Loughnane, and Bubba Jenkins, all had to make weight on the 19th of August, as did Dakota Ditchever, who obviously also fought on that card.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a long time ago to have cut weight, put the weight back on, fought, gone back into training camp, cut the weight again. These guys are doing it properly because they're keeping their weight low or close to what they need to be.
Yeah,
it's dangerous, but these guys are doing it properly and professionally.
Yeah, well, weight cutting. Yeah, I don't entirely know. Like, I do want to tell people of have a height restriction, because even Alex Pereira is one of those, he's a heavyweight by the time he gets to the middleweight fight 24 hours later. Exactly. There is stuff like that, but it is a weird thing that sometimes you have weigh-ins. I don't know. With wrestling, they used to have same-day weigh-ins. So if you had a 3-day wrestling tournament, you had to be on weight all 3 days. And Frank Trigg was like, yeah, you're dead by the end. You don't even have strength left if you have to make weight 3 days in a row. I'm not even sure if that's the right thing. I'm not sure if that would de-incentivize people and force them to go up in weight, because people, if you have the potential and it makes a difference for your pay that you have a size advantage or a strength advantage over Frankie Edgar, you're going to take that. You're not I'm bigger than Frankie Edgar, but for some reason we made weight yesterday somehow we're the same size. No, like clearly we're all bigger than Frankie Edgar, for example. We're always going to take that advantage. So I'm not sure if there is, like, philosophically, yes, there is a way to fix it, but it's never worked. Like even in boxing for years and years and years, we have seen guys from weight classes get bigger and bigger and bigger over time because they've gotten better and more efficient at cutting weight. For example, Muhammad Ali was 6'1" at heavyweight. His grandson is 6'1" at middleweight. They're the same size. These guys are the exact same size. Exactly. Just one knew how to cut weight really well. So he has a bit of a size advantage, but like everyone's doing it. I don't know if there is a way to de-incentivize this.
The only way I think it could come in is rehydration clauses in the contracts. So like we saw with Darren Till when he fought in Liverpool, he missed weight when he fought Stephen Thompson, but he couldn't. That was a 170-pound fight, and I don't think he could weigh more than 180 on the day of the fight. That would force people to come down naturally in weight, and then not put on too much weight. Maybe not 10 pounds, because that's not a lot at all. You know, that's maybe, let's say 50. You can't go more than 15 pounds above the weight that you're fighting at,
or a percentage.
So for Alex Pereira, I think we saw.
He was almost 230 or something.
Exactly, 230, weighing in at 185 the day before, or 180. Yeah, well, it was a title fight, wasn't it? So 185, 184.
Yeah.
Let's say that he can't weigh any more than 200 pounds on the night, and it just it makes it a fair. And you could tell in that fight specifically, he was massive in comparison to Israel Adesanya, who doesn't cut. I mean, he cut a bit more weight, but he doesn't cut a lot of weight to make middleweight. And you know, we've got weight classes for a reason. We saw Israel Adesanya versus Jan Blachowicz. It was a size issue on the ground that Jan Blachowicz was just able to dominate Israel Adesanya. Let's stop this from happening, because it's more than anything, it's just unfair. It's just, I mean, it's who can cut the most weight, which of the biggest guys can cut the most weight, and it's, you know, and get away with it, and then, you know, put on that weight within 24 hours, because it's 24 to 36 hours that they're fighting after the fact. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, I know. And one champion, again, like philosophically, I love what they're doing. The hydration is the right idea. They had their weigh-ins 36 hours before the fight. 36 hours? I have a day and a half to go eat Chinese food and burgers, and I'm back in. What are we talking about here? So philosophically, yes, we should be doing a lot more things, and there's a lot more to be done. And even with USADA, like USADA's at your house all the time. They're always visiting fighters. Could you guys just do a quick weight check while you're there?
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'll figure it out from there. But I don't know if the UFC, maybe this is the bigger picture kind of thing, because if the UFC does something, all the other leagues will start doing it as well. Maybe the UFC straight up just doesn't care. Because this is like, it doesn't make any difference. Essentially, we're setting up a system where more main events are canceled. We're setting up a system where more guys don't make it to fight night. Why would we want this system, right?
And it's setting up more issues than solutions, in my opinion. We wouldn't be talking about Aspinall losing to Jermaine Durandamy in 16 seconds if she hadn't had a savage weight cut. We wouldn't have those comparisons of, oh my God, look how big Conor McGregor is now.
Yeah.
If he hadn't used to cut to 145, he's probably about 190 at the moment, if not more. And he doesn't look unnatural at the weight. He looks big, but he doesn't look, you know, we're used to seeing him skinny with no muscle, no fat.
Well, I think almost what you're saying is like his featherweight run was BS because he had too much of a size advantage. Exactly. And maybe you could make that argument.
Exactly. And not only was it that, you know, he's the rare sort of example of someone that carries their power when they cut weight.
Yeah, he does.
Which not everybody does, you know. Frankie Edgar had pretty, you know, he had knockout power at 155. He had knockout power at 145. Didn't carry down to 135.
No.
You know, he knocked Chad Mendes dead at 145, and then, you know, he's been the past however many years he's been fighting at bantamweight, year and a half, 2 years, he didn't quite carry down to 135. And the same with TJ Dillashaw, his ability to take a shot when he cut all that weight down to 170, 125, gone.
Yeah.
It's not, for me, it's not logical. It doesn't quite work. And, you know, why guys are doing it, I don't know. But the opportunities maybe just aren't there outside of the UFC to cut weight, to compete in a different weight division. You know, Kayla Harrison and Larissa Pacheco this weekend at the PFL.
Let's do it. Let's jump in. Let's do it.
They're fighting at lightweight. It's Kayla Harrison Fight Week, guys. But they're fighting at lightweight. And the lightweight division in women's MMA is non-existent. They are the only lightweight fighters in you know, Cyborg can make it, yes. Amanda Nunes can make it, yes. But there's not a division in any organization where it's like the sort of headline division. With the PFL, Kayla Harrison and Larissa Pacheco are headlining the main event this Friday night because she is the biggest name, not because it's a competitive division, because she's the biggest name on the card.
I know.
And, you know, it's frustrating in a way, but at the same time, you know,
she's the PFL name. She's the biggest name in the PFL, even with Fabricio Verdum and Rory McDonald and a bunch of other cool fighters. It's the Kayla Harrison show. And
rightfully so, because she is dominant. She is a phenomenal fighter. She's an exciting fighter. She speaks really well. She has time for the media. You know, we spoke in at PFL 9. Was it PFL? Well, PFL London, I call it. You know, when they went to the Copper Box, and I was there with MMA Sucka.
Mm-hmm.
She's a genuinely nice person. She's really good with the media, but sometimes you get guys and girls that are really good with the media who aren't great at fighting. Kayla Harrison dominates people.
Yeah.
And yet I think this weekend is going to be, without a doubt, the toughest fight of her career. Larissa Pacheco is in a phenomenal run of form. Since losing to Kayla in, I think it's the 2019 tournament.
Yeah.
Obviously, 2020 was called off. 2021 was a strange one. And then now we're back on the sort of regular season, as it were, in the playoffs. She scored 5 knockouts, all of which in the first round. Yes, she's beaten the same girl twice, and the girl that she's beaten twice had no business being in there with her. 5 first-round knockouts in a row. She's without a doubt the heavier hitter, and I've written a piece on Kayla Harrison and Larissa Pacheco that will I'll be probably publishing today, actually, thinking with it being a Friday card. But Kayla Harrison's got to be really careful, because we know what Kayla wants to do. She's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist in judo. She wants to close the distance, get it in the clinch, get it to the floor, hip throw her, you know, drag her to the floor and dominate on the floor. No elbows. That's the most important thing. No elbows at all for Kayla, which, you know, that's an argument for another day. But she's got to be super careful closing distance on Larissa Pacheco, because Larissa could knock Kayla out easily. Mm-hmm. Ask the 4 girls that she's knocked out prior to this fight.
Yep.
Yes, Kayla's 2-0 against Larissa Pacheco, but Pacheco's got so much better, and so is Kayla, but we haven't really seen it because of the sort of just how dominant she's been. But Pacheco's got so much better than the last 2 times that they fought. I'm so excited for this one. I'm pretty sure it'll be on Channel 4 in the UK, but I'll have to double check, because wherever it is, I'm not missing this one.
Well, it's insane that anytime, even if we had a male fighter in like a heavyweight class, and we get to say he has 5 consecutive first round knockouts, that's such a hype thing right there. Larissa Pacheco's coming in on 5 consecutive knockouts in the first round in women's lightweight. Come on. And her career, she's only lost to world champions. She has losses to Jermaine Durandamy, Jessica Andrade, and Kayla Harrison. Those are great fighters to be losing to. Like, and everyone else, Sarah Kaufman, all the other names that she's fought, Irene Aldana, she's knocking them out. She's scary as hell. She's tough. This is a great fight right here.
I did not realize she's only 28 as well. That is insane. You know, she's 22 professional fights, 1 exhibition on Tough. She's 28 years old, and like you say, she's knocking girls. Irene Aldana knocked her out. Yep. Carl Rosa submitted her, and then Sarah Kaufman decision. But that, I mean, come on, Sarah Kaufman's one of the
she's an OG.
Mount Rushmore. She's a Mount Rushmore kind of girl.
Yeah.
But then you've got it's the fight for me. That's the story going in. Can Kayla avoid the knockout blow of Pacheco?
Mm-hmm.
She has done in their past 2 fights. She's going to have to be on the ball in this one.
It's an
of course, I'm
exciting
picking
one.
Kayla Harrison because I'm
no
a
doubt.
massive fanboy. But it's principle that we're not entering a Kayla Harrison fight like we did in London, thinking how long is it going to be until Kayla finishes her. There's a lot more questions around this one.
How about the co-main is an interesting one because I don't entirely know what to pick. I want to pick Brendan Loughnane over Bubba Jenkins, but I don't know if he has what it takes. Bubba Jenkins isn't messing around. He's got tons of power. He's a dangerous striker. I don't know if Brendan Loughnane can actually win this one.
It depends if I'm picking with my heart or with my head. I think
I know.
it's a tough fight for Brendan, especially seeing Bubba Jenkins' last fight against Kudo dominated. Hit him hard, hit him heavy, got him to the floor, choked him out.
Yeah.
And he didn't even get him to the floor. He threw him. He picked him up and dropped him to the floor. And Kudo's no joke, He's not an easy fight for anybody. Brendan's last fight against Chris Wade, he defended the takedowns when he needed to. He had the crowd behind him because it was in London. Obviously, Brendan's from Manchester. There's going to be a big English contingent out there, I believe, with Dakota Ditcher on the card, with obviously Brendan himself on the card. It's a tough one for Brendan Loughnane.
Yeah.
However,
you could pick him to win. You could. That's fine. It's a safe pick, but it's
like
tough.
I say, he's been training with Tiger Muay Thai, and I listened to you. This is a crossover guy. He was on national talk sport radio on Saturday night. I was in the car on Saturday night, and Brendan Loughnane was on the radio talking about how he's been training with Arman Sarukian a lot. Arman Sarukian is a phenomenal wrestler. Brendan's obviously traveled to get the training that he needs, the takedown defense that he needs. And let's not forget that since 2017, he's lost one fight, and it's a split decision to the eventual champion, the undefeated PFL champion, Kay Bulaev. Again, probably butchered that. He wasn't able to compete this year for reasons out of his control, I believe. But it's a tough one for Brendan. But if Brendan can win this, he becomes top 5, top 3, maybe pound for pound British fighters out there today. Leon's of course number 1, and then it's difficult outside of that to pick one. Brendan's probably that guy. The PFL have invested heavily in Brendan. Let's not forget that he won and dominated his fight on the Contender Series, but because he shot for a takedown in the last few seconds just to really cement that win, Dana didn't give him a contract. I don't care what you say. Dana White is regretting that decision now, seeing what a star Brendan Loughnane's become in the PFL.
In the PFL, imagine the star-making system the UFC. Get the PFL.
And look, let's say hypothetically Brendan wins this weekend, he becomes a millionaire. He becomes a PFL champion. He gets so many more opportunities off the back of this. If he's honest with himself, I kind of think that he'd be glad that he didn't get that UFC contract, because there's no way he's making the kind of money in the UFC that he's making in the PFL. No. If he gets into the UFC, he's fringe main card because they build their fighters so slowly. Brendan's had no choice.
He's had no choice. He's still on 10 and 10 probably right now.
Exactly. He's had no choice. Since the Contender Series, he beat Bill Algeo in June of 2019. He's had 7 wins and 1 loss, a split decision loss.
Yeah.
Deep down, I think he's happy that he didn't get the contract on reflection.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Personally, I hope he gets it done. Of course, it's coming from a British bias sort of way, British bias sort of way of thinking about Brendan potentially lifting the belt, and it's just an exciting fight, and
it is. That's a well-matched fight. That's a good one,
without a doubt. And these are the 2 best guys at 145. This is the way this tournament works, and it's not that you've had to pull out and you've had to fill in on late notice. These are the 2 best guys at 145, and I'm excited for it.
Moving down to the tournament final for heavyweight, we have Ante Dalia versus Matthias Scheffel. What do you think of this one? What do you see in it?
I think it's Dalia all day. Scheffel, obviously, I believe, stepped in on late notice last time out.
But they've already lost to each other, or he's already Ante's beat him once. Yeah.
He's coming off a win against Juan Adams. It isn't exactly the best prep. No offense to Juan Adams, but it's not the best prep, to be honest.
I agree with you. Let's go on to the next one because heavyweight. Julia Budd, Aspen Ladd. It's not a tournament final, but it's a good fight.
I like the way that the PFL have done it because they've got obviously the undercard. They've then scattered a few tournament finals. Then they've got the non-tournament final, as it were. I believe this one was meant to be this fight, taking up the sort of splitting up the tournament finals, was meant to be Marlon Moraes versus Shane Burgos. Obviously, Shane Burgos had to pull out. Gutted about that.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is. So they've replaced that with a compelling fight. Aspen Ladd up at 145 again. Obviously, she lost to Norma Dumont last time out at 145, I believe. And Julia Budd, she's coming off that loss. She came off the loss to Cyborg in Bellator. She had 2 more Bellator fights. Then she signed for the PFL. We were thinking, is this finally going to be the girl that gives Kayla a bit of something? A bit of difficulty. She obviously then lost. She won her debut and she lost last time out against Fabian. She was meant to fight Kayla. She had to pull out with an injury. But this is the first women's featherweight fight in PFL history, and ahead of next season. We've got to ask ourselves the question: is Kayla going to cut an extra 10 pounds next season? We know that she's fighting for the PFL again next season, but is she going to cut that extra 10 pounds, go down to 145, and really make a look for potentially, if she wins this weekend, a quad, getting 4 titles in a row? There's a great possibility, and Aspen Ladd and Julia Budd are sort of opening up the featherweight division for all the women at featherweight that want to compete at featherweight that can't, because UFC and Bellator's featherweight are pretty thin.
Yeah, it's actually 2 good names opening up the featherweight division. So hopefully there's more coming out. Stevie Ray versus Olivier Aubin-Mercier in the final for lightweight. I do like Stevie Ray not because he's Scottish, but because he's such an overachiever.
I was going to say, where do you side with this one? With the Scot or with the Canadian in you? Which way are you? This one, like I say with Brendan Loughnane, I'm picking Brendan because he's English.
How do you pick?
Where are you siding with this one? It's a difficult one for you with your heart and your head and your current location, your former location.
Yeah. Thing is that I think Stevie Ray, I don't know how talented he is, because he didn't even start in athletics. He was just like a guy who fought on the streets and then accidentally took up MMA. He doesn't even really like it all that much. This is what I mean of being like an overachiever. Olivier is such a hard worker in the gym, but just it seems like he's almost missing the key to be a really great fighter. I don't really know. I could see this one going either way. I think on paper, Olivier should be the favorite, but honestly, I get the feeling Stevie Ray is going to submit him.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because, like you say,
I don't know.
He's a slight, yeah, exactly. Olivier's a slight favorite, but Ray, you can't take away from the fact he's coming off 2 wins against Anthony Pettis, that modified twister, and then I think it was a decision. Was it the decision in August? You can't take away from that. And Aubin-Mercier is, he's
experienced against high level,
but he's not. If you look at the guys that he's lost to, Alexander Hernandez isn't great. Yeah, Gilbert Burns obviously is a ground fighter, and so is Sarukian. I think if Ray can get this to the floor, I think it could be dicey on the floor for Aubin-Mercier. But
I know,
for a fact that he's gonna bring his A game. He's gonna bring the team for Zahabi and everyone. And I'm assuming that he still trains out of TriStar. I know that he did.
I think so.
He has a lot for most of his career, but this one for me is one of the more compelling fights on the card. I don't know how it's going to go. With the other fights, you've got an idea as to how it's going to play out, but with this one, it's a difficult one to call, and it's a difficult one to predict as to, like I say, who's going to get the hand raise, who's going to get the $1 million, who's going to walk away with the 155-pound belt. But it's a Tim Wheaton rivalry fight, which I'm more excited about.
We have a tournament final for a welterweight, Delano Taylor versus Sadibou Sai from Sweden. I have no clue. I don't know. What do you think of this one?
I mean, Taylor's got nothing to lose. Coming in against Roy McDonald on late notice and knocking him dead, sending him to retirement in that first round. I think all the pressure's on Sai, and I think he's going to soak up that pressure, and I think he might even. I don't know an awful lot about Taylor, to be honest. Like I say, he's coming on late notice, coming off a loss, and finishes Roy McDonald. So we've seen that sniper-like straight down the pipe, they're not McDonald out in Cardiff. I think Sai's just going to have a little bit too much experience for him, and I think he's just a better, he's long. Sai, I think he's 6'2", I think 6'3" with an 80-inch reach against Taylor, who
welterweight. He's so big.
Well, I mean, Taylor's 6'3", but he's got a 77-inch reach. But I think maybe this opportunity's come slightly too quickly for Taylor. So I am picking Sai in that one. But like I say, Taylor's got nothing to lose. Taylor can just go out there for the first 2 rounds and just throw the kitchen sink at him and see what happens. It's one of those where I think Sai's going to win, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Taylor managed to knock him out.
And last tournament final, we have Omari Akhmedov versus Rob Wilkinson. What do you think? What do you see?
Wilkinson finishes him. If you look, as we were talking about the about Larissa Pacheco, Wilkinson. I mean, if you look at his UFC run, he's got 2 losses, including a loss to Israel Adesanya. But then since then, he's had 2 kickboxing fights, of which he won both, a boxing fight in which he won, and he's also got 5 finishes in a row. He's got a guillotine, strikes, knees and punches, knee. This is a well-rounded mixed martial artist. Rob Wilkinson, in my opinion, first, second round, and no disrespect to Akhmedov, because he's again a good fighter with plenty of finishes, plenty of high-level experience. He beat Ian Heinisch, beat Tim Bosch, draw with Marvin Vettori. He's been in there with some really good guys. Lost to Chris Weidman when Weidman was on his comeback. But I just think Rob Wilkinson's in such a rich vein of form at the moment, and I think he gets it done. 2nd, 3rd round KO maybe.
No, these are good picks for the PFL final. A couple more fights, and then we'll get you out of here. We have a Magomed versus Gleason Tebow. I just like Gleason. I'm happy to see Gleason.
I saw some odds for this with Tebow being a huge favorite.
He shouldn't be a huge favorite. No,
he
might not win.
Yeah, I'd pick Magomed in this one. But these names today are just doing us.
I know.
It's worth remembering that his last win came against Delano Taylor, who is in the final.
I know.
Work that out. Yeah. We've got obviously Marlon Moraes supposed to be fighting Shane Burgos. Is fighting Shaman Moraes at 135. Now I thought the whole point of Marlon Moraes coming back is that he was going to fight at 145 against Shane Burgos. Now he's cutting an extra 10 pounds on fairly late notice. I don't like that, but
nothing makes sense.
Make the catch weight at 140. But it is what it is. Jeremy Stevens versus Nathan Schultz. I was supposed to interview Jeremy Stevens this Friday. It didn't quite come off, unfortunately, but I'm wondering how Jeremy Stevens' weight's going, because last time out he had to shave his beard and shave his head just to make weight. So
I don't know.
It always gets dicey when you see a fighter, have to quite literally lose their hair to make weight.
That's tight.
We've got Baggio Ali Walsh making, his I think it's his 2nd PFL appearance. Oh no, he's making his PFL debut. Obviously, I think he's the nephew of sorry, he's the grandson of Muhammad Ali. Fighting.
Is he really?
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. This is what the PFL do. They sign these guys that you've never really heard of, but who have got potential. And he's fighting a guy who's making his debut.
Muhammad.
I'm going to urge everyone now: don't go on Tom Gracia's Tapology page, because that is one of the strangest fighter photos I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
It is what it is. And of course, the main girl, Dakota Ditchever, on this. I'm a little bit disappointed with her opponent, I'll be honest. 2-0, hasn't fought,
Dakota beats her, no problem here.
Dominates her, I'm not quite sure where, Catherine Koraginas has come out of the woodwork from, but I think Dakota's last opponent, in my opinion, Hasna Gaber, gave up in there. She got one knee to the stomach and didn't fancy it. Dakota's getting this done. Jeremy obviously did the interview with her. I managed to set that up for those guys. Mm-hmm. He did the interview with her on, I think, Friday night, Saturday morning is when I watched it. Really good interview. If you haven't caught that, it's Dakota's a great interview. She's a great fighter. Mm-hmm. PFL are putting a lot of stock in Dakota Ditchever for someone that's, she's only 24. She's kind of the face of the female lower weight divisions in the PFL. She's the first female to walk at flyweight. She's having another flyweight bout. Obviously, She fought in August. Now they're putting her on the MSG card, the big end of the year show. There's a reason that they're doing that. It's because they've got a lot of faith in her, and rightfully so. She's 6-0 with 5 finishes. You know, an extensive Muay Thai kickboxing background, an extensive. You know, she got three or four amateur fights under her belt, and she's, like I say, she's still only 24. She's undefeated, and she's doing it right. Like we alluded to at the top of the show, she's trained at Manchester Top Team. She's gone over to ATT to get the sort of more elite training. You know, we've seen pictures of her with Ioane and Jacek. We've seen pictures of her with some of the top girls in the UFC and top girls in Bellator. And obviously, it's a good atmosphere around ATT. You've got Dakota there, and you've got Kayla Harrison training out of ATT. But you know, all eyes on the PFL this weekend. We're going to be releasing plenty of content this weekend on this week. Sorry, on the PFL. Don't forget, it's a Friday night card. It is a pay-per-view in the US, I believe. It's $50, which seems like a lot, but you know, as we've just alluded to, there's plenty of close fights, and there's plenty of names up and down the card. This is considerably stronger than a lot of the pay-per-view UFC cards. You know, you've got names up and down the card, and you've got 6 people, I believe, 6 fights. Sorry, 6 fights where a champion will be crowned and $1 million will be given away. And you also get a performance from Wiz Khalifa, which is what it is. You know? I don't quite get that, but it's very Super Bowl-esque. But you know, they want to do that and charge you $50 for it. They'll do that and charge you $50. It's kind of is what it is. But you know, if you're not tuning in for any of the fights, Wiz Khalifa's giving you a little performance probably halfway through. So it's interesting.
All right, good stuff. We got PFL. We covered Bellator. We talked we talked to UFC, even though there was nothing. We were scraping the bottom of the barrel with that UFC card. There's nothing more we could cover this week. We got it all done. Frazer, got it all done. Links will be down below for articles and author links, all that good stuff. Thanks for your time, Frazer.
Nice one, mate. Yeah, we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you don't want to see our faces, which I can't blame you on a quite cold Tuesday morning, I'll make sure to post the Spotify links on the MMA Sucka website, Twitter and stuff, and keep an eye on the MMA Sucka Twitter, because Tim broke a really interesting piece about Alistair Overeem, which got plenty of clicks yesterday. So
I thought we were going to talk about it. We ran out of time. We didn't have time for the Overeem thing.
But we'll
that's how
we'll tease you with it there. Head over to the MMA Sucka YouTube, Twitter, or Tim's Twitter. Tim will drop the links in the video description. I retweeted it on the MMA Sucka. You might not know what it's about yet, but you know, go over and click the link, because it's an interesting one.
Well, that's because him popping is barely a top 5 headline in this day and age. We all knew it was gonna happen.
You can't go from looking like you did in your last UFC fight to looking like an absolute Adonis in your first sort of fight back with Glory, but.
We have questions.
You know, the classic "I'm not surprised" comes to mind. Nate Diaz still reigning true today, as he did all those years ago against McGregor, and Alistair Overeem popping for a PED. I'm not surprised.
It is what it is. All right, let's get out of here, Frazer. Thanks so much.
Thanks, mate.